Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Wolfram language design review, part of our incremental language development series. Looks like we have several topics here, and I'm noticing that something is not right here. Let me try and fix this. There. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so
Let's start with the GeoReposition.
yep. So this is a new function in 14.3, and Jose had a couple of specific questions and design points to go over.
Okay.
Right. So we looked at this at the very end of the geo design review,
Mhm.
and we were discussing the second argument, the possible notations for the displacement or rotation in the second argument.
Mhm.
And what we had decided is that the main one was this first one. You specify the some original position and some final position, and everything
Yep.
is dragged. Now, what I wanted to add is this alpha angle that allows the user to rotate also. Because, for example, in this case, I wanted to compare the coasts of the US and Australia. And so some rotation is needed around that point that I marked with a geomarker.
In what units? In
In
degrees
degrees.
or?
In degrees. One can also use a quantity, that minus 12.
Yes.
So a quantity with degrees or radians would also be fine. But a number is interpreted as usual in geo as degrees.
Clockwise.
Clockwise,
Oh.
exactly. Clockwise is a standard convention in geo, which unfortunately is the opposite as mathematics, but yeah, in geo, all angles are clockwise.
Mm-hmm.
And
what's the
so,
matrix?
and yes, matrix is the fully general. One can specify an Euler matrix or whatever.
So do we have a notation for that? That's, I mean, in the general way that we do, I mean, if we have a rotation matrix,
Mm-hmm.
and we have, this is a 2D rotation matrix, correct? Or is it
3D rotation
3D?
matrix. Yes,
So this has a roll pitched yaw
exactly.
matrix as well.
Yep.
But all of those things resolve to just 3x3 Cartesian matrices, yes?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
And that matrix can be placed in the second argument of GeoReposition.
Mm-hmm.
Euler matrix as well, etc. So a shortcut that is implemented right now is if one only specifies a position, then it means a rotation around that position.
What happens if you just say, I mean, you presumably you don't need the GeoPosition wrapper here. I mean, it's nice to have, but you don't need it, right?
Um,
You could just say
yes,
a naked lat long list, presumably.
yes, I think it works too.
And presumably entities work as well.
Absolutely, yes, yes.
Um,
There are examples in the ref page of
okay.
other positions. Now, the extension that we discussed at the end, and which is not implemented yet, is how does one specify that take all these primitives and move them all to the same position, like compute the centers automatically. Some sort of listability. And this is something I don't know how to do.
I don't understand this. What is GData here?
GData is anything that you can place in the first argument of a geographics.
Okay, but then what does it mean to put them all to one position?
So this is something that at the end of the previous meeting, Jeremy Davis suggested. How does one say, oh, I have all these countries, I want to move them all at the same place to compare? And so I haven't been able to find a nice way to do that. I understand the operation, but
I see. It's like put all of them on top of each other.
right, exactly. Perhaps this just
With
requires
rotations of
mapping.
things.
Yep.
Because they all have to have rotations, otherwise they'll look kind of crazy.
Well, they will all be in the end oriented towards north. But I guess the question is, how do we indicate compute an interesting center for this data? And that's what I'm trying to represent there with automatic. Or perhaps one wants to say, move the northwest corner of this region, to that other position, something like that.
Oh boy. I mean, I don't know. Maybe this operation is best done by just finding the polygons of the countries and sticking them in a you know, I think this is a kind of a bit of a stretch for what this is doing here.
You mean the automatic choice?
Yeah, this
okay.
choice here. I mean, I think we should not worry about that right now. I
Okay,
mean, this is a pretty weird operation to begin with.
Yes. Yes, it was just trying to avoid specifying both positions.
No, I understand. I think we should skip this.
Okay.
For now. I mean, we've got geocentroid, so you can always find a centroid of something.
Well, we don't have that function, but yes, centroid could compute centroids of things.
Don't we have that? We have geo. Well, we have. Oh, we don't. But can yes.
It could be computed. We have discussed this. It's just that there are several ways of computing it. So it's a function that would perhaps require a method.
Yeah, right. Okay, I think we should skip this for now.
Okay.
This function altogether. I mean, we could make a WFR if we can define something reasonable to do here. You know, we could make a WFR for, you know, geo. I don't know what we would call it, geo stack or something.
Right. Okay.
Okay. This next one is a function that's been proposed a couple of times. We'd said tentatively it makes sense to have a random string function. I've implemented a version that's in prototype, and in doing that, I have a couple of thoughts or questions.
I keep on forgetting that we have this. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so firstly, with random string, at least our default parameters are random string of letter characters.
I agree.
Which is it's a more descriptive name, but obviously we're not going to call it that. What we've kind of done is mirror what exists in generate password with the extensibility to say, I want uppercase characters, but not lowercase characters. I want these extra symbols.
Do we want mixed case for random string by default? Is that obvious to people?
It's not obvious one way or the other to me.
I would have assumed that it would generate printable ASCII by default, any of those characters, but I don't know.
Right, but that doesn't answer the question of uppercase or lowercase. And
well, that would include both.
Oh, you're saying yes.
Well, it would include both, but it would also include characters that we don't currently include. Random string isn't a random set of all ASCII characters. It's default bounded to letter characters.
You know, I have to say, I think it might be nicer to just do lowercase.
To do lowercase by default?
Yeah, I think so, because I think that there are use cases here where, you know, you're generating random identifiers for things, and it just looks too weird to have these mixed case things.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think, obviously we'll be able to toggle those. So I think
yes. I guess it's certainly true that when I'm generating random strings, I tend not to hit the shift key manually. Then I don't hit the shift key. So I generate all lowercase things.
Yeah.
Could there be like named configurations for convenience, like printable?
Yeah, we could have presets. We could say random ASCII or.
Let's not bother with that initially. I mean, we've got the way of extending to that. Let's see how it feels like. I mean, I think, because we got to have, it will be something like printable arrow 3 or something, or is it 3 arrow printable?
Yeah, we could always have, a WFR that's a lookup function that says, random string parameters, and we could have named presets or something like that if we want to centralize it but not have it baked into the function itself.
Sorry, say that again. What?
We could have a WFR that is basically a collection of named presets that gives you the association form with parameters that you could use if we want something that's halfway in between having it in the proper
I
function.
think, I mean, wouldn't it be something like this?
Well,
Do
why
we
not
use
have a
that
string
syntax?
in place of where you would have the association, like in that 2-argument form below? So the string is
Well, I had a
It's a one
question of
argument form. I mean, this
where
presumably
is
there's
the
a one
length
argument
determined?
form here. What's that?
It's a
Go ahead.
2-argument. Yeah, that's the first argument is the parameters, and the second argument is
I know, but if I just do one of them, then presumably it makes one random string. There
Yep.
it is.
Mhm.
Right. So where is the length there? And I guess
The length is a parameter, which is getting autofilled
okay.
here.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Sorry, can the length be in an interval? Or, I mean, from 3 to 6?
We don't currently support that, but you certainly could. It'd just be a random choice of values in the interval for each instance.
I mean, we don't really do that with any other random thing, like random image, it's a set length
Mhm.
or set dimensions. Obviously, with random reals, you're giving the dimensions. That would be a bit strange. I mean, we could do it, but
Well, remember, random real, you're not.
well, yes,
I see you're giving the
yes,
range.
yes, I guess you're just giving the range.
Yeah, you could always include a random choice as the
Yes, as the
string
value.
length instead. So
I think this will be a nice replacement for random words in, I don't know, testing tabular in large cases. But I think it would be better if we can exercise different lengths.
Okay, but I think then I think you should say random string of random integer of whatever. I mean, that's a way of, because that way you're defining what the, otherwise you've got to worry about, because there are fewer strings of lower length and it all gets kind of complicated. See what I'm saying? And what does it mean? What's the distribution? You're taking a distribution over strings.
Well, I would assume homogeneous distribution of lengths.
Yeah,
So if
I know,
say,
but it's not obvious why, because remember, there's more, there's sort of more entropy in the longer lengths. And
yes.
so it's not completely obvious that you would want, you might want equidistribution based on, in other words, if you ran it 1 trillion times or something, you would get many more copies of a short string than a long string, which might be considered weird.
Okay.
So I'm thinking that's not a thing. Now, I do think in terms of random text, boy.
I did talk briefly with the ML and the neural nets team about this, and they didn't have any strong opinion and hadn't really thought about it. But I do think
I think we should be able to generate just like random variate of learned distribution of text should in fact let you get random text. And I think this random text of just random words is kind of a,
yeah, it's
in modern
not
times,
super useful. In the world of LLMs, it's silly to have random text just be concatenated.
I have an
random
external
words.
meeting I have to run too.
Okay, thanks, Itai.
Okay, so I mean, I do think it's an interesting project to try and make a meaningful random text function. I think I'm going to suggest that as a project for the summer school or summer camp.
Okay,
let's
we can pass that along. Yeah.
I'll
or yeah, I guess if you're keeping a list, that's even easier.
Right.
So there was one design question for random string in terms of the null argument case.
I think it's
Right.
cute to have it generate a single character.
Just a single. Okay.
I would think so. I don't know. What do other people think?
I mean, I don't think there's any other more meaningful default.
Always generate the empty string.
I mean, I guess
That's just useless.
yeah, it might be more intuitive, but it's kind of useless.
I mean, unless we want to generate some length 5 or something string.
Yeah, I mean, I think my main observation in playing around with this is that when you're generating random strings, it's very common that you want to parameterize it because your use case kind of dictates what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
So
Actually, I think I agree with Steven now. When you do the association form, you have a default length. Maybe it should be the same default length as when you do the association.
What is that default length?
I think that one might be inheriting from the same default length that random password uses currently,
which is wrong.
I think
Yeah,
I don't think it should be doing that.
I think it should be 6 characters or something.
Okay. Yeah, I could see 5 or 6. Yeah, I will fix that there.
Okay, so then random string of null should just be the 6 character lowercase thing. Okay, what's next?
String transform. This is something we also had proposed some time ago, and I had a chance to work on. This is basically, there's a bunch of things like capitalize and decapitalize where we're taking text or strings and we're making some structured and systematic modification.
Yeah, I remember. This is useful. Yeah. I mean, is the name right?
It's not the most descriptive, but the idea is that the function is fairly general, that we have basically, these different methods of transformation. So my only qualm with it would be that string transform sounds a little more
fancy.
Yeah, fancy than what we're going for.
It kind of reminds me of the sort of transliteration functions in bio. Convert.
What do we call the group of functions that capitalize lives in the docs? Just call it capitalization, which isn't helpful here.
Well, what are these things? These are we have a list of these.
Yeah. URL encoding there.
Let's watch it say something kind of stupid.
String transformations, okay.
I think it thinks it's telling you what you want to hear because it already saw a string transform.
Oh, shoot. You gotta hide it. It didn't see the
format,
previous
yeah.
version of what it generated, did it? In this case.
No, it didn't.
What about something around conventions?
String convert.
Yeah, I mean, that seems too much like again, it seems too powerful for this. Might be better than string transform though. Especially with the URL stuff.
Yeah. It's kind of a mix of things because like Slugify falls in the middle where it's an encoding form that's a little less formal than URL encoding.
Look, transform just sounds very fancy.
Mm-hmm. We can go with string convert for now and see.
Let's see. Change doesn't really make it. I think string convert is better than string transform.
Okay. And the other design question is that some of these operations are more intuitively have parameterization. So with Slugify, by default, we're inserting hyphens, but you might want underscores or something else. We could effectively have the same sort of parameter association that we were looking at above with RandomString.
Let's not bother for the time being.
Okay, yeah. Again, I think if you're looking for some, the idea is this is a convenience for lots of variations on
why is this called clean URL? Why don't you just call it URL?
We could call it URL also, yeah.
Or unless we're calling it URL encoding or something.
Yeah, I think URL encode is an alias for used there as well.
But URL, I mean, we have a function.
Yeah, we have a function. We also have a function for capitalize.
Then I think we should call it URL encode.
Okay.
Do we have a URL decode as well?
We do.
No, I know we have this function, but I mean, in this case, we should also support URL decode.
Yeah, I believe I have that implemented also, but I can add it pretty easily. Anything we have existing functions for are trivial to add in. There's a couple things where Slugify and our Camelize functions don't have built-in system functions.
How do we capitalize every initial word?
So in the every initial word, I think you could say all words.
No. In capitalize.
Oh, in capitalize?
No. I'm saying here we got title case.
Yeah.
Don't we? Isn't there a thing? Isn't there a book, something or other? Isn't there a thing where we're just capitalizing the first word altogether and things like this?
Yes. So the capitalize function by default only capitalizes the first character in the string. There are different capitalization schemes as an argument in capitalize.
Capitalize itself does that. So
yes. Yeah, we added various forms of capitalization. Title case is one of the capitalized
It's a pity
forms.
that some of these things are verbs and some are nouns. Like title case is a noun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Could that be shorthand for capitalized title case? Because there are multiple schemes for capitalize, right?
Yeah.
We want to be able to reference them here.
Yeah, it may be better to stick with verbs, but then The variants do get pretty wordy. Title case capitalize.
No, it's not bother. I mean, I think this is okay. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, let's move on.
All right. Bit count. This is basically a suggestion. We have lots of dedicated
Yes, it
bit
seems
functions.
It seems worthwhile. It's counting the number of ones, right?
Yep. And we do have an internal function that does this already. It just hasn't been
Yeah, I know.
promoted.
It's somewhat useful,
Mm-hmm.
right?
All right.
Consecutive replace. This is like sequence.
Yeah, this is replacing a specific element or pattern with a sequence of
weird.
elements.
Yeah, I guess different, and it's different places.
Yep.
Oh
And
boy.
So I think this would be an obvious case if we were to have it where the cyclic wrapper could be useful to alternate between once this list is exhausted, stop versus continue wrapping around with replacements.
Well, it's the kind of thing where it would be useful and you kind of don't remember. You'd never remember to use it. We've got sequence replace, don't we?
Yes.
Yes.
Which replaces sequences of things here. And I this is one of these things where if there was a good name for it, it might justify having it. If there isn't a good name for it, nobody's ever going to remember it. What is a good name? Consecutive doesn't make sense to me at all.
Yeah, I mean, I was wondering about like cyclic replace if it was naturally cyclical, but then we run into the possible confusion of if we want an exhaustive form of it.
Yeah. I mean, it's like riffle, isn't it? Somehow. It's some kind of riffle replace.
Yeah, riffled replace.
Is it enough like riffle to be? I mean, it's weird to know. I mean,
yeah.
Does it only work at level 1?
It currently only works at level 1 because we would need to sort out traversal order in terms of how it would work at arbitrary levels. That isn't a technical problem,
the
but it's a
same way that
design
map
problem.
does it. But it would I mean, this to me, this is not, well, okay. It's kind of like map indexed at some level. It's some. I mean, alternatively, this is a thing for replace. It's a right-hand side wrapper for replace, where it just says, one could do this with some kind of closure-like mechanism, right? I mean, what this is, I mean, there's a general thing which one does quite often, actually, which is to say, module u equals 0. And then here, we could say,
replace,
this thing /dot Okay, so that's really what we're going for here, which is indeed quite useful. I've used this many times, things like this. Not necessarily with /dot, but the general construct of, It's kind of like map index, sort of, except that it is a every successive use gets a new. I mean, it's also like the actual internal operation of block, for example, or module for that matter. Module better, right? With the dollar module number, right? So let me.
Yeah, this could be useful, like to fill skeletons. You construct a skeleton with a single object, and then you want to replace it by various possibilities.
Right. I mean, okay, so let me think about this for a second. You're doing an evaluation where this construct, every time it's used, wants to kind of update its use. Oh boy, it reminds me of these things in SMP called chameleonic symbols, which were not a success, as their name might already tell one.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't think I've heard that one come up before.
They were. They were actually originally introduced to deal with like dummy variables and tensors, where you make a copy of the tensor and you want it's kind of like unique.
Okay.
This is a bit like the new incremental function stuff.
This here. It is, yes, it is. I think that's where we should think about this, right? I mean, I think this is too specific. I don't think it's useful because unless it had an incredibly wonderful name that is easy to remember, which it does not.
Yeah. Okay.
But I do think this idea of not having to, set a variable, do this, that's an interesting idea. And let's think, how does it relate to the iterative functions?
You could have an incremental function that's a while loop where each step of the loop increments u and have a incremental yield.
Yeah, it's a bit complicated. What is the cleanest way to do this? I mean, so in other words, imagine let's imagine that this was called, incremental block or something. It's not a very good name, but let's imagine it was this. And then every time you use u somehow here, it would get, I mean, well, let's say, let's see. Well, okay, let's say and then then this would say, okay, I'm going to start u at 0, and then every time u is used, every time it appears in expr, I compute f of that result. So it's effectively the nest list, effectively the successive elements of u, successive appearances of u in expr. Every time u is evaluated, I mean, this is really oh gosh, what is that? But we called it apply to, right?
This may be also related to supplied. It's some sort of map counted.
Mm-hmm. But it's also, I mean, apply to, right? It's doing an apply to, basically. It's a block applied to of some kind. Well, it's an automatic applied to. I mean, I actually do think this will be useful. It requires some more untangling.
Well, couldn't it be more general than incrementalized? Like, couldn't f be the function increment itself? And u is initialized
Absolutely.
there, whatever you call it.
U is initialized what?
So in that block, u starts out at 0, right? And f could be the function increment.
Absolutely.
But it could also be just any arbitrary function that modifies u.
That's why I'm writing it as f here.
Yeah, but is incrementalized the right name then?
No. It's more like, that's not right either. But this idea that one has, it's a way of avoiding an explicit global variable of some kind. Because I agree, this is a thing one wants to do. I mean, the alternative, I guess, is just to say module whatever the initial u is, u equals u0. And then every time you use u, you're just saying u equals f of u, which isn't terribly hard. Although I have to admit, I don't use that metaphor. I don't use that idiom particular. Maybe I do. But it's a module, not a module. Well, I think it's something to talk about in connection with this iterator thing.
Okay.
I mean, if you think about it a bit, maybe you can come up with some this is the iterator version of this. Let's see.
This is just making a counter, but you could replace the body of the while loop with like u equals f of u.
So what does this do?
So now called ds of next. Every time you call it, it'll go to the next incremental yield.
Lovely. So it has within it its counterness. So it's almost like you could have a thing. I mean, another metaphor for this would be, set counter. Let's say a 0 ... And then you could say counter of a. And every time you say counter of a, you get a new value. I mean, I'm not sure why that's any better than just saying module u equals 0, u plus plus.
We also have a built-in counter data structure. Just a proof of concept.
For the data and the data structures.
Yeah. Create data structure of counter, comma, value.
Yeah. Right. So, okay. Anyway, so
Okay.
some thought.
Yeah, we'll let that simmer a little bit and then circle back to it.
Oh boy.
think this one, Rick, this one actually might be yours. But it was an interesting one when Dan and I were going through some of the more recent WFRs we thought had some potential usage. It's nice to have the more structural output from an outer operation. But
It is. But boy, why?
So this basically should give you, like, if you just did fixed point with values, or like replacing the associations with values, it should give you the same output as outer, barring key collisions.
Yes. But what does it do in the nested case here? So it's giving nested associations.
Yeah, just like regular outer would give you nested lists.
What other things do we have? I mean, which are association variants of functions?
So association map was my main inspiration for this, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. So
yeah, I think association map, association thread would maybe be the other one.
I think, yeah, this makes some sense to me, this association outer thing.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we should do it. Looks reasonable to me.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else we should go over?
Not immediately. That actually puts us right about on time.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
All right.
See you
Thanks,
all soon.
everyone.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.